Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar that is focusing on NIH Career Development K Awards. And this workshop is hosted by the Milken Institute School of Public Health, Office of Research Excellence, the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, and also the School of Medicine and Health Sciences Research Workforce Development Program in partnership with Hanover Research. Welcome, everyone. So during this workshop, we hope to learn more about the purpose and types of K Awards. And hopefully we're going to learn more about how we identify the right funding mechanisms for our career goals, and also get some tips from our experts who are joining us today. So we are going to go through an overview of the NIH Career Development Awards, and also focus on how to prepare a competitive proposal. We're also going to look at issues around mentoring and institutional support within GW, and lots more. And to help us achieve all these, we've got three wonderful panelists, and I'm going to take some time to introduce the three panelists to you. So we are firstly going to hear from Sarah Ott, who is our key presenter. And Sarah is a senior grants consultant at Hanover Research with more than 20 years of grant writing experience. And she has helped academic and research organizations strengthen their research funding strategies, working across the disciplines. And earlier in her career, Sarah wrote and collaborated on major research applications for federal agencies, including the NIH, CDC, and others. So Sarah, thank you for joining us today. And Sarah is going to be followed up by Alison Hall, who is going to serve as an investigator panelist. So Dr. Hall is a Senior Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Neurology and Rehabilitation Medicine here at the George Washington University. So she joined GW after an extensive faculty career at the Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, where she led a productive extramurally funded basic science laboratory studying sensory neuron development and information pain. And in addition to her research grants, she has developed and won numerous NIH R25 research programs for undergraduates and medical students. And each of these has produced excellent outcomes. So she joined GW in 2017 as an Associate Dean for Research Workforce Development to enhance research training for students, postdocs, and also junior faculty. And she's leading various initiatives. And our third panelist is going to be Dr. Daisy Lee, who is also coming in as an investigator panelist. So Dr. Lee is a tenured associate professor and social scientist specializing in behavioral and community health. She has a current K01 award entitled A Technology Enhanced and Multi-Level Approach to Promote Cervical Cancer Prevention Among Women Living with HIV. She serves as affiliated faculty with the Department of Prevention and Community Health here at the Milken Institute School of Public Health. And her research focuses on community-engaged cancer prevention and health disparities. And her work especially prioritizes minority, low-income, and underserved populations. So after these presentations by our three wonderful panelists, we're going to go through a Q&A segment. So colleagues, I invite you to submit your questions and comments using the chat and also the Q&A functions. And after the presentations by our panelists, we are going to go through some of those questions. So now, let me hand over to Sarah.
Thank you. I am going to pause for a second to share my slides very quickly. Wonderful. So everyone should be able to see my slide set now. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to really demystify NIH Career Development or K Awards, what they are, who they're for, and how to approach a competitive application. So the goal is to help you leave with a clearer sense of which K mechanism fits your career stage, what reviewers are looking for, and some concrete next steps you can take right away. As Dr. Paul mentioned, a few quick logistics before we start. This session is designed to run about 2 hours, including the panel discussion and the Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions throughout using the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll respond as we can or at the end of the formal session. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with a brief introduction and overview of NIH K Awards so everyone has the same foundation. Then we'll talk about how to find the right K mechanism, including using tools like NIH Reporter and Matchmaker. And from there, we'll move into what makes proposals competitive with special attention to K Awards with the career development plan as the central driver. So we'll spend time on mentorship and institutional support because those sections often make or break an application. We'll also cover the NIH BioSketch requirement in Science CV, then move into the specific aims and research strategy, what they need to communicate, and how they fit within your career development plan. And then we'll discuss review and scoring, what to expect, and close with some GW successes, resources, Q&A, and next steps. So at the highest level, NIH Career Development or K Awards provide protected time for research and career development activities that move you as a scholar toward independence in biomedical, behavioral, or even clinical science. So these awards support both mentored and independent career development, depending on which activity code you would select. And they're structured to build your skills, experience, and give you the support you need to become an independent investigator. The ultimate goal is a strong and diverse pipeline of highly trained scientists who can address health-related research needs. This slide shows where Ks sit in the broader NIH research trajectory. And you can really think of K Awards as a bridge, often between training and full independence. So we have, in addition to some of the early K Awards, you'll also see that there are some K Awards for more senior investigators on this trajectory. Here we have the K-22, which is offered by some institutes and centers as a career transition award. Then we have a K-99 ROO, and we have this later in our session as a pathway to independence award. So you're working toward your full independence as a researcher. There are also institutional level career development awards like the K-12. Moving higher into the independence in your research trajectory, we have the K-01, which is a Mentored Research Scientist Development Award. That is what Dr. Lee will be talking about as far as her funded award goes. And a K-08, which is a Mentored Clinical Scientist Development Award, a K-23, which is a Mentored Patient-Oriented K Award, and a K-25 that's specific to quantitative researchers. So the K01, K08, K23, and K25 are mentored mechanisms. And we also have these um, other mechanisms, including K02s and K24s, that would be in other career stages, and those transition awards like the K99 ROO. Here you can see how these awards might fit in with research grants or NIH awards. We have RO3s, your small grant funding mechanism that typically supports pilot studies or secondary analysis. We have the R21, which is an exploratory developmental grant, and the main R or research award, which is an R01 research project grant. So this gives you an idea of how the Ks fit in with the R awards along your research trajectory. Today we're going to focus on some of the common K mechanisms to which PIs will apply from your institution. I'm going to cover some of the broader sort of criteria, what these awards are, how to find them, and some more general tips and tricks. And then we'll move to Dr. Hall, who will present more specifics on certain sections of the K awards. And then Dr. Lee will discuss her experience with writing and managing the award. So here are a few common K mechanisms and who they're designed for. The K01 supports postdocs or early career research scientists who need additional mentored training and experience. K08 supports clinician scientists who are developing toward independence, and it helps address gaps in academic clinician scientist pipelines. The K23 is focused on clinically trained professionals committed to patient-oriented research specifically. And the K99 supports a mentored phase followed by an independent phase. And notably, it has no citizenship requirement, which makes it a key option for some applicants. So across mentored Ks, you'll see consistent expectations. Eligibility constraints can include citizenship for many mechanisms. There can be a minimum effort commitment of 75% effort, limits on overlapping career awards, and a strong emphasis on a committed mentor or mentorship team and a credible path to R01 level independence, depending on at what point you're at in the trajectory that we just discussed. So once you have a chance to think through some of the basics or the overviews of some of the K awards and the activity codes, you can take a look at the NIH Research Training and Career Development portal. It's a great starting point to explore those K opportunities, the eligibility, and the active programs. You can see on this page, they show the K awards by career stage and purpose. So it's very helpful if you can look by the timeline that you're on as far as where you're at with your degrees and your research. You can also, where the magnifying glass is here on the right of the page, you can search for the open funding opportunities under each activity code as you go through those. There's also NIH Reporter, which can help you to see what's already funded, who's funding it, so what institute, and by what mechanism. So you can use a filter to filter down to, let's say, the K01s and the specific institute, NIH institute you might be interested in, and find those funded awards and appropriate program officer contacts. When you are connecting with NIH Reporter, you will also see, in addition to exploring those active awards and the associated institutes and program officers, there is a tool called the NIH Matchmaker, where you can paste an abstract or specific aims document into a field to find similar funded projects and identify program officers that way. So after you have a sense of the specific K mechanism you might be targeting, you can look for those open funding opportunities through the portal we discussed. And that will show you the specific notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO, for that award. The NOFO is going to tell you what NIH expects for that mechanism, and importantly, what the specific institute or center that's supporting the mechanism may require or emphasize for programs of support under the activity code. Here are the parent announcements, and you will receive slides from today's session with these links. These are the parent announcements, or the main announcements for the K01, the K08, and the K23. And you must choose the right notice of funding opportunity based on whether your proposed research includes an independent clinical trial, a clinical trial under mentor guidance, or basic experimental studies with humans. And these distinctions are very important because they determine which notice of funding opportunity you can submit to and what additional review and form requirements are going to apply for you. So with the K announcements, the K applicant or awardee, if they have the primary or lead responsibility for conducting and executing a clinical trial, then they will be applying to independent clinical trial required NOFO. If the applicant is proposing research experience in a clinical trial led by the K Award mentor or co-mentor, they can apply to the independent clinical trial not allowed mechanism because it is led by the mentor. If the K applicant is proposing basic science experimental studies involving humans, which can be prospective basic science studies involving human participants, then they would choose the independent basic experimental studies with humans required notice of funding opportunities. So this slide gives you NIH's practical distinction between an independent clinical trial, so one where the K applicant has primary responsibility for conducting and executing the trial, with the trial funded by the K Award, sometimes as an ancillary or feasibility study, and then in contrast, a clinical trial research experience, which means you're working on a trial led by your mentor or another investigator to build your experience, and you describe your role in the research strategy rather than treating it as your own independent trial. NIH is also very clear on how they define a clinical trial. So if you have human subjects, you prospectively assign an intervention, evaluate effects, and target a health-related outcome, then NIH is going to consider that study a clinical trial. And that determination is going to drive your notice of funding opportunity choice for the particular NIH K award opportunity you target. In addition to the notice of funding opportunity, you'll want to access the K Award SF 424 forms and guidance, which are linked in the notice of funding opportunity. A common question is what to do if the notice of funding opportunity and the application guide conflict. And the guidance is to follow the application guide by default unless the notice of funding opportunity explicitly adds or replaces standard instructions. So, as with all NIH funding mechanisms, K awards require early planning. We recommend starting 4 to 6 months before the due date or sooner. And you'll also want an NIH Commons account at least a month before the due date. And K applicants need an ORCID ID. Because reference letters can become a bottleneck for principal investigators, you'll want to notify referees early and make it easy for them to share their letters of reference by sharing your CV and specific aims with them. So when we are working with K applicants through Hanover, what we find to be most important is to be able to clearly communicate your career goal. And you might find it helpful to use what is called a gap analysis approach to pinpoint this. So thinking through the training you need and how that is going to align with your longer term goals and your short term objectives. So, one way to do this is to think in terms of the skills you'll need, your prior experience, and how it shapes your abilities and the gap between where you are now and where you need to be, along with the training plan and how it's going to help you to close that gap. So when we're setting a career goal for a K award, we're thinking very long term. It's more of a vision statement. It's not typically measurable. Once your career goal is clear, your research question needs to match the K award mechanism scope. So the time frame you have, the level of effort you need to devote to the research project, in addition to the effort that's going to be needed for your training activities, and the resources available to you, including the budget. So you'll also want to align your research questions with the institute or center's interest. A strong question is going to be specific about the population you are targeting. It's going to be relevant to your field, and it's going to fill a clear gap in the evidence. And that will set you up for the next stage of your career. So, as you're thinking through your research question for your K award, we recommend asking yourself about the field. If you know the literature well, are there any gaps in knowledge that your study can fill? Is there already similar research being conducted in the topic area? If so, how does your work compare? So, how would your work build on the existing literature, and how will it differ from the existing literature? So, is there essentially room for improvement or to do something differently than what has been completed and funded? If your work or work like yours is already being funded, something you can learn from NIH Reporter, you want to be able to show the relationship of your work with what has been published from the funded study. If the funded study isn't published, you won't want to specifically call out the recently funded project in your application, but you will want to use that project to inform the way you write about your project, to be able to show how your project is distinct from what is already funded. We also want to think about the potential impact of your project, not only on the field, but on the population of interest, on public health, and on your own career development. So when you're looking at what has been funded, this is really a high yield step when you're preparing a competitive K application. And it's one many applicants rush through. So when you look at funded studies, you're not just checking whether your topic has been funded, you're thinking or reverse engineering what NIH considers an appropriately scoped K level project. So, first, we want to pay close attention to the size of the project, the scope of the project. Um, Look at the number of aims, the scope of the work that they're conducting. And K awards generally support focused, well defined projects, not large multi-arm studies. So if the funded projects look smaller and more targeted than what you're proposing, that could be a signal to scale back. Second, you want to look at the career stage and background of the awardees. So ask yourself, do these investigators look like me in terms of training, year since degree, and publication record? And if all the funded PIs have very different profiles, um, than yourself, then that may be a red flag that you could be mismatched to the mechanism, or you might want to speak a little bit further with a program officer or with someone who might be better able to discuss the potential fit of you as an investigator. Third, you want to look at how the research and training are integrated. So, in funded K applications, the science almost clearly supports skill development, almost always. So, you'll see projects that are designed not just to answer a question, but also to teach the candidate new methods, new approaches, or even movement or transition to a new field. So, if your project could just as easily be an R award, reviewers will question why a K is needed. So, how to search efficiently? NIH Reporter, again, is going to be your best avenue to do this. You can filter directly by the activity code like K01, K08, or K23, which will immediately then narrow those results to the right mechanism. And you can filter by institute or center, which is critical because different institutes fund different types of science and sometimes apply different expectations under those activity codes or K mechanisms. So I recommend starting with a broad search by key terms related to your topic, then progressively narrowing by K mechanism, institute, and fiscal year to see what's been funded recently. If you already have a draft of your specific aims or a concept, the NIH Matchmaker tool can do this work for you by identifying those similar funded projects and pointing you toward the institutes and program officers that would be most aligned with your science. So by the time you finish this step, you should be able to say, this is the size, complexity, and career focus NIH typically funds for this K mechanism at this institute. And my proposal clearly fits within that space. You also, for mentored K awards, need to form a strong mentoring team. So you want to pick mentors who are accessible. They should have funding from NIH. Multiple mentors are okay. They can be internal or external to your institution. And you will need to discuss your plans, your project, and career development needs early on with these potential mentors to be sure they are on board and they can actively participate. So, you also want to keep in mind that your K application is a collaboration between you and your mentors. Be sure the project is distinct from your mentor's research. Each mentor needs to explain how they will contribute to the development of your research career and discuss the research as well as the additional activities, your career development activities like seminars and presentations, and how they will contribute to the development of you as an applicant. So you'll need to have regular interactions, and you'll need to be able to specify how you will interact, the proposed activities, and how they will advance your research and your career. Mentors will also need to help you strategize your plan to transition to independence by the end of the K Award and convey their support for that pathway to independence. You will also want to select mentors who can provide details of their previous experience as a mentor and the outcomes, successful outcomes of their mentees. You can always reach out to a program officer to discuss your research area, training needs, and your career development plans. When you have a specific aims document, you have a layout of an outline of your career development plan and a concept in general, you can reach out to a program officer, either using NIH Reporter to find an appropriate program officer, looking at the notice of funding opportunity in section 7 to the scientific research contacts for the institute or center, and identify the program officer whose portfolio and interests align with your topic so you can have a productive conversation about the fit of your project. So, in addition to a specific aims document and a research strategy that you would typically complete for an NIH R award or other award, for the K Award or Career Development Award applications, you will have a candidate section. And in this section, as reviewers read, they're typically asking, are you ready? Will the K accelerate your research trajectory? And your background should connect your past scientific history to where you're going. So, why this award sort of fits into your story and leads you to achieve your goal that you've set out, what themes have guided your work, and why any shifts in direction make sense. So while this section should coordinate with your biosketch, you don't want to rely on the biosketch alone, and you don't want to make your background section a dry review of what you have already covered in your biosketch. You want to use it to provide context for your research identity, and why your research experiences and how your research experiences have shaped your career and how you arrived at your current position. So this helps to show your potential to develop into an independent investigator by summarizing those steps through your career and also your potential, including any previous grants, experience, publications, and skills. For career goals and objectives, here, be explicit about your short-term objectives versus your longer-term goal or goals. And typically we look at the goal as being something that would happen within the next 10 years. We also, in the goal and objective section, want to point out again that you have a need for this award. So you have a need to develop research skills, professional skills, or experiences that the K Award will enable, and that it will position you for independence. So we want to state both the immediate and long-term objectives. If you're writing something like a K99, you want to connect those to the direction of the later stage of the award. We do recommend using SMART objectives specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound objectives, and to write a paragraph about the activities you're going to undertake to fulfill the objectives before you describe the activities in more detail along with your timeline. So your candidate plan for career development and training will be how you are going to structure activities such as coursework or workshops that are going to help you learn techniques or develop needed professional skills. So we want to indicate the percentage of time you're going to dedicate to each activity by year. And it's really as important as your research plan to justify your need for a K award and explain how it's going to be a step toward your career goal and move you to independence. So, specifying training and courses that you're going to participate in, how often you're going to meet with consultants, how all of this will help you reach your objectives. So, tying in the activities with the objectives and stressing your commitment to a career in biomedical or behavioral sciences. If you're targeting something like a K08 or K99, patient-oriented research, if you're focusing on K23, or clinical or translational research. Or even integration of biomedicine and quantitative sciences if you're looking at something like a K25. So read the relevant notice of funding opportunity for other elements you should include in the career development plan, and provide a career development timeline, including plans to apply for the subsequent grant support. So we typically recommend applying for subsequent grant support as early as year 3. And your career development plan can include a visit to an external laboratory, another site, to learn new technologies or new approaches, and to show that you want to network for the future as a part of moving into your own independent research career. So, because the success of the K is so critically dependent on the expertise of your mentors, you'll want to devote some space at the start of the candidate plan subsection to provide a short paragraph summary of each mentor's key accomplishments, as well as a description of the synergistic nature of the team, so how they relate to each other. And although much of the information will also be in the bio sketch, it's worthwhile to provide it in this single section in the main proposal, so we don't need to rely on reviewers to look back to the bio sketches as they're reading through your plan. We recommend focusing on a small number of training objectives, about 3 to 5 in the career objectives subsection, and then organizing the content in the later part of the candidate plan subsection after the mentor team summary by those training objectives. So the timeline that you will include should also be organized by training objective. And the timeline is typically organized with columns for each year of the grant, with each row being a separate training objective or subdivision of the objective, or by activity. That shows reviewers how your activities fit in with your program objectives. So make sure the plan, the timeline of training activities based on any needs in the proposed research. So looking back to your research strategy and the timeline you'll need to complete your research study, you'll want to make sure that those timelines are coordinated and that you have developed the skills in order to conduct that part of the study. So for example, if you need training on a data analysis technique to complete your aim 2 of your proposed research, which is going to happen in year 2 of the award, you want to make sure to complete your training on the technique during year 1. You also want to be explicit about how much % effort you're going to devote to training and research each year. Remember, for most applicants and for several K awards, you will be expected to contribute a required effort, sometimes 75%. So it's important to specify how the activities will require that much effort. And it's typical for the training effort to decrease over the course of the K. Now, this might vary depending on your own training requirements and your research plan, but remember that it's okay if that effort is going to be less later on. So the most efficient place to specify the breakdown of effort devoted to training and research is in the timeline within the candidate plan subsection, with the bottom row of the timeline specifying percentage of effort to training and research with values. Make sure to include explicit plans for how you will work with and meet with your mentors, both individually and as a group. At least one time per year, the mentor group, led by the primary mentor, should evaluate your progress and provide you with feedback. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Dr. Hall speak to specifics for your candidate sections of the proposal and talk about some internal resources you have available and support from her and others on campus. Dr. Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I think that was a wonderful overview of the K Awards. I'm seeing some fantastic questions in the question and answer. Please put them in there. I can't answer all of them at the same time, but there's great discussion. I wanted to go from Sarah's overview into a bit of a drill down on the career development plan component of the K and help you think about what fits in there. So from my perspective, having chaired a K study section and helping folks prepare Ks, the career development plan is absolutely key as to whether you win a K award. Remember that the K family of awards have a goal to help you become research independent. In NIH land, that's a successful R01 or R01 equivalent and a research career. They typically provide between 3 and 5 years of support. They'll provide partial salary support. Most of the Ks provide limited research funding, and there is an assumption that if you need more than that amount allocated to you as the K scholar, you will be using your mentor's funding for some of that. And they all require a team of mentors and advisors, and I want to get into that a little bit more. I'll show you in just a moment a bit of a K checklist for the length of the components of the application, and you'll see something that's quite different from an R01. The applications are in roughly 3 parts: information about the candidate, you, information about the career development plan, what you're planning to do with this activity, and information about the research plan itself. So these are pretty different from a research application that focuses only on research. And I want to make sure that you understand why the career development plan plays such a big role. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So this is a general checklist for the components of a K application. And you'll see the activities that you're asked to do and the page limits associated with them. So you'll write an abstract, just as you would for any other application. You write a project narrative, which is the lay understanding of what you're intending to do. You have an introduction if it's a resubmission, but not for a new one. But here we get to some business. There's a section on candidate information and goals for the career development plan and the research strategy, and that component together is 12 pages. You can decide how long you want your candidate information and career development plan is in comparison to the research strategy, and I'll give you a suggestion about it, but that's 12 pages. You then have one specific aims page where you make your argument for what you're going to do and what impact that will have. There's required information about training and responsible conduct of research. And then if you look at the page numbers again, you have a big component, which is plans and statements of your mentor and co-mentors, 6 pages. And the opportunity to have letters of support from collaborators, contributors, and consultants, another 6 pages, limited. Further, a description of institutional environment and commitment to your research development. And at the very bottom on this diagram, I want to make sure that you recognize that you do need to develop an NIH biosketch, which is limited to 5 pages. So if you think of the breakdown of what this application has in it, there's a lot committed to the career development plan, and we really think that the research is a platform for your training and research education. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. Thank you. For those of you who are at GW, and actually these pages are open to the public, we've put a lot of tools and archive presentations on Ks, as well as some K examples, on our website in the School of Medicine, Health Sciences Research. And I highlight 2 general areas that would be interesting to you today. On the left-hand side, there's clinical translational research and monthly workshops. We run monthly workshops on various aspects of K and new investigator applications, and there's much more detail on many K components there, including effective mentor plans, including effective career development plans, and so forth. On the right-hand side, we list a checklist for career development awards and Ks, and something I'm going to spend a little time with you on, self-assessments and mentor committees. Because the career development plan is expecting a mentor contribution, we've put up a lot of resources for you to use in choosing mentors and having effective interactions with them. So feel free to go into this site as you like, and I will refer you back to those. It's open to you. Next slide. So I just want to toss this in there. All of us are now living the change that the NIH has put in, that we must use Science CV to produce our NIH biosketch, which is now considered part of the common forms. I realize that's a lot of jargon, but just this year, the NIH went through with its initial plan that we all must register in Science CV and link our ORCID IDs to produce an NIH biosketch. The Himmelfarb Library worked with us to develop a research guide on how to prepare your biosketch within Science CV and how to solve a number of those general questions. And I refer you to that for some really great support. On the right-hand side, I'm showing you an example of an NIH biosketch, and already I can tell you it's the old form. It's going to look something like this, pardon me, in which you describe your education and training, and you write a personal statement for whichever application you're looking for. So if you haven't done it already, please take a moment over the weekend to go and build your biosketch in Science CV. It will help you no matter which step you take next. Next slide. So I want to dive in for a little bit on this anatomy of a career development plan. Remember that you have 12 pages to solve this problem, and I'm going to make a suggestion about how you approach that. I think you will like to spend something on the order of 1.5 pages on the section of candidate background. This is what influences and what experiences and what training have led you to be proposing a K career development proposal now. So did you have some earlier training? Did you get a master's degree? Did you have research projects? Did you do a clinical study? What have you done in the past that's led you to where you are right now? And this will build, as Sarah mentioned, off of information in your biosketch. But again, you do not want to send people to other parts of the application. This is an opportunity for you to create and tell your story that is persuasive that you need a K award. So you spend a little bit of time telling the reader how you got to where you are. And then I would suggest you spend on the order of 3.5 pages on the career development training plan itself. I think that really should include some self-assessment. Where are you right now? What do you need next? In particular, what do you need to become independent? So that's the goal of the K Award. I'll show you in just a moment that we strongly recommend using an individual development plan or a clinical research appraisal inventory to identify right now what you're good at and where you see gaps that need to be addressed for independence. The second piece of this training plan is to describe, as Sarah mentioned, your goals, uh, what, what you need to learn to become independent, and how you're going to learn them. And in general, I think that that falls into three general categories, and I'll expand on this in a moment. One is whatever research skills you need to complete the K research plan. Some of those are likely to come from your mentor or your mentor advisory team. Some of those might be previous collaborators. Some of those things will be experiential. You might be doing a single-cell RNA-seq process and working with bioinformatics, or something that you don't know very well yet. The second part is research knowledge. In here, you might be including coursework or workshops that are germane to what you're trying to do. I'm seeing a lot of people who describe taking a course in machine learning. People will take a course potentially in biostatistics or epidemiology, and we should talk a little bit more about where that makes sense. Lots of times they're taking workshops in how to do a clinical trial. But this is a place where you have more formal didactic training in the thing you'd like to know. And then finally, I do not want you to dismiss the idea of professional skill development. You should put in your career development plan your plans for presentations, your plans for publications, your plans for additional grants. We often suggest that you will try to submit a grant like an R01 in maybe the third year of your 5-year-long K. Not because you're suddenly going to get it, but because this is a chance for you to develop those skills without causing a gap in your support. And we can talk more about that. And then finally, so that would add up to 5 pages. Finally, I would say you use the remaining part of your 12 pages on the research plan itself. And as Sarah mentioned, within the research plan, you should be weaving in these training components. So as you say, I'm going to be doing thus and so, you describe in the research plan that your mentor has expertise in that area and you will be doing this under their guidance, or you will take a course that's relevant to this. Where you can integrate those things will make a much stronger application overall. Next slide. Thank you. So let's break it down a little bit more. Your goals for the candidate background section, which we suggest is about 1.5 pages, is a place to tell your story. How did your research interest develop? When did it develop? How do your achievements support your ability to become independent? So have you already perhaps published a paper? Even if it were on a different subject and a while ago, it shows that you had the ability to complete a study. Are there any concerns in your application? You will see in the eligibility for Ks that you do have the opportunity to get extended eligibility before applying. If you have done clinical work, if you were in the military, you can also ask for a parental exception and extension to the K eligibility. You may or may not want to discuss some of those things in the application itself. And this is also a place for you to give us a hint as to what you think you're strong at in preparation for this application and independence, and where you need more work. It's a place to begin to say you need this K. So it's a delicate balance between saying you're quite competent at certain things, but that you also need additional development. If you don't need development, the reviewer will instantly think, well, why aren't you writing for an R? And for those of you who have the option and are still eligible for a K, I really urge you to use that mentored period to fully develop before moving into independence. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. Next slide. So the career development plan itself, we're suggesting about 3.5 pages. We have some examples online. This must be customized for you. You're all coming at this from different backgrounds and different achievements and different needs. One of the ways to explain that to the reader is to use an individual development plan or a clinical research appraisal inventory to identify if you have any academic or research gaps. We're currently suggesting that you identify 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses in this section. That's actually in some of our reviewer notes as well. So you will say, I need more work on getting pilot data on a population study, for example. Then you begin to describe how you're going to achieve that. One of the most important things is to identify a mentorship team. The K applications I see typically have between 3 and 5 mentors, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. Typically, one of them is your primary mentor based at your home institution, and then we'll talk about what the other mentors might be doing as well. Sometimes you would propose to do a degree program, like an MPH, for example, if you had little formal training in what you need to become independent. It's very important to identify specific conferences or workshops where you'll get information in a formal sense, potentially new skill-based research experiences. For those of you in a laboratory environment, any new techniques from mentors and collaborators, and include professional development and memberships. I think this point is actually pretty important. We want you to be looking at things a little bit larger than your home institution, and often one professional organization might be the home for you intellectually that you need to identify with and can use as a member to pursue real development. I know Sarah suggested a meeting at least once a year. I think I would propose 6-month updates with your mentor team. Obviously, you can work with them between that time on specific issues. I think we would go for a shorter time period before you meet back with that team again. Again, I would mention that proposing an R01 equivalent type application in year 3 is appropriate. It will feel really premature, but you will learn a lot from doing it, and you'll be able to use your pilot data toward an application at a good time. The other thing is I really want to stress that you should avoid listing only activities with your primary mentor. So whether that's wet-based or dry lab-based, we want you to be interacting with your whole mentor team effectively, and if you will, with the outside world effectively. So where national meetings make sense, where national collaborators make sense, where you can use core facilities, these are all good things to get a little bit bigger training environment than only your fantastic mentor expert. Next slide. We post on that website that I showed you earlier examples of individual development plans and clinical research appraisal inventories to identify your strengths and your gaps. You really should be using these anyway. They're dynamic documents that help you identify what your long-term career goals are and how you're going to get from here to there. It helps you manage your career development plans. We post the My IDP, which is a confidential national online approach that's particularly good for wet bench scientists, and it links to AAAS resources. We also have faculty, scholar, clinician, investigator individual development plans that talk a bit more about some of the clinical duties and strengths that you might want to develop, as well as the clinical research appraisal inventory. I think it leads you through a set of questions about your career development and leads you to think about what you need to do more. We also post on that same website how to structure those self-assessments and interactions with your mentor committees. And we have done specific archived sessions that are available to you online on faculty mentoring committees and IDPs and so forth. So I hope you take advantage of those resources if they're helpful to you. Next slide. Okay, what about this primary mentor and advisory team? Your primary mentor on a K application should be a renowned expert in the field that you're applying in. He or she should have a track record of NIH funding. Remember, we're applying to the NIH in a K application, preferably with an R01, but there's a lot of latitude here. So the track record of funding is important so that they know that your person has been effective in research. It doesn't have to be an R01. The other thing that is helpful for the NIH is that they have a track record of supporting other K scholars. That's not as common among mentors, but if it's there, that's actually very, very helpful because they know your mentor is able to launch people into independence. In the mentor section, you're going to be talking about the frequency of meetings with your individual mentor. These might be much more frequent than the whole team as a whole. It could be monthly or every other month or quarterly because they're probably teaching you primary skills. Most of you will also identify what I'm calling an advisory committee, and we can talk about how people fit into the application a little bit. This is typically your mentor plus, again, 2 to 4 critical experts, some from other institutions, some might be collaborators, and some might be mentors. And we can talk about that in detail. Typically, if you want the study section to see the expert capabilities of your mentor team in a biosketch, they're going to be called co-mentors. If they're providing you with access to a particular machine or collaborative approach, they might be collaborators instead. You will sing their praises in both categories in the application itself, but sometimes we need to talk through who should be in which role with you. Do note, as I showed, back up, thank you. Do note that as I showed on that K checklist, you will have letters of support, which are from your collaborators and contributors and consultants. And here you should think carefully about what each one of them is doing for you in this plan, and you may want to draft that letter for them. We really want to avoid having them look at your biosketch and say, Dr. Smith was really great and graduated from this school at that time. You really would like it to be focused on the skills and collaborative efforts that they're going to support. I will tell you that the study section does believe your mentor, your primary mentor, has read the whole application. And when you make an error, they blame it on the mentor. So it's really helpful to have a mentor who's willing to be engaged in this application and really support your K. Next slide. There is an important component for institutional commitment for a K08 or a K23 and in the other Ks as well. So the sponsoring institution, in this case, say GW, must provide a statement of commitment to the candidate's development into a productive independent investigator, and that commitment is not contingent upon receipt of this career award. I saw a question in the QA about this. Typically, this institutional commitment is written by your chair, and it typically describes that you have, they have a commitment to you as an investigator, depending on the level of the K that's required, as an instructor or an assistant professor already, not waiting for you to win the K. This is a longer negotiation. That letter also provides assurances that you have required effort for the activities in this award. Typical K commitments are 75% effort, or 50% if you're in a procedural specialty, say surgery or something like that. And so that chair is giving that level of support as well. They'll also provide assurances you have access to an office or laboratory space or other resources that you need. Most of those are likely to be in your mentor's lab or research group. And they'll also provide assurance that there'll be appropriate time for the mentor and other staff consistent with this. So this is an incredibly important letter, and I would suggest you speak with your mentor and potentially even the Associate Dean for Research in your school as you begin to head into that question. Next slide. All right, so what skills do you need? So you filled out your IDP or your CRAE, and you say, well, I need more experience in, I'm making it up, running a clinical trial. I've never done that. I've seen them happen around me. You should be asking yourself, who will teach you and how will you learn those things? And in that example, you may have among your mentor advisory team some who will teach you about the clinical condition or the epidemiological issues with your particular research focus. They might share with you diagnostic tools, current treatment protocols, and so forth. Some of your mentors might help you with conceptual models and study design and analysis techniques if this is in their wheelhouse, which we hope it is for that primary mentor. Um, that mentor team, somebody on it, will help you with writing for peer review in journals, might help you with conduct of clinical trials if that's part of it, training and professional advancement, etc. So you should move from thinking of one mentor who does everything to a mentor team that complement each other to help you get your K career development goals achieved. You'll need to name which one is doing what thing, but I think it makes a much richer training environment. Next slide. So I think this is my last slide, and I apologize that it's a little bit small, but I wanted to give you a discrete example of what these training timelines look like that Sarah introduced before. On the left-hand side, there's a table of goal-specific training, and this individual had 3 goals. If you look at them, gain training in peer relationship assessment and intervention development. And they said, how am I going to do that? And they said, I'm going to go to this conference, I'm going to go to that course, I'm going to go and visit my collaborator, right? And they told the time commitment for those. Goal 2 was gaining training in advanced statistical methods, innovative clinical intervention approaches, etc. And they said, how am I going to do that? I'm going to take this statistics class, that online course, this conference, 2 NIH workshops, 3, visit my collaborators, and so forth. And then goal 3, expand knowledge in food allergy management and clinical trial implementation. How am I going to do that? I'm going to visit another lab of my collaborator. I'm going to take this online course, a conference, and so forth. So I would not rely upon only taking courses at GW that are long courses that are semesters in person. That's not maybe a practical answer for what you're trying to do. So we post a lot of sources from the NIH FAES programs to online Coursera courses to other approaches for you to learn the skills you really need. You won't inoculate yourself by saying, I'm going to take these 6 courses and therefore I'm done. So be thinking broadly about it. I show you another example that's pretty effective on the right-hand side, which is the timeline of career activities. And you can see that this applicant has put on the right-hand side which year that thing is going to happen. This is a terrific idea, okay? So it gives the reader an understanding that you know what you need to learn first and second and third, and you're pacing yourself in something that's actually achievable. We sometimes see people propose way too much stuff that's actually detracting from their research goals. And this is a nice way to outline which courses, which workshops, which research activities you're going to do. So I'm only showing a part of that. The full numbers of these are also available on that website in some of our career development archived workshops. So you do want a table of activities organized by goals. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about the details of this, but I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Thank you. So for your research plan as a part of your K award, for the specific aims page, we want that typically organized into 4 paragraphs. And while there's no required format, there are expectations as to what should be included here. So with a specific aims page, we're typically emphasizing the big picture, and providing a brief plan to address the problem or the gap in evidence that we have identified, and then outlining the aims to fulfill the project and describing your potential impact. So you can see here, we would want to open with the need, with the public health need, then laying the framework for what the problem is, what knowledge gap exists, what your proposal will ultimately address. And this is where you're going to summarize what is already known in the field and why there's a need for your proposed work. Then we would get to the solution paragraph. So where you would introduce your project concept, the details related to your long-term goal, and the main objectives of your project. With a K award, we also want to weave in the information about your career development. So describing expertise of your mentors and institutions, the models you're going to use, the tools, and including that in the aims page in addition to describing your research project. Then we would discuss the aims, your aims statements with hypotheses, and use active verbs, focus on presenting a brief approach and the hypotheses or expected outcomes. So again, thinking big picture. And then we would close with a statement that summarizes your innovativeness and the potential impact of your project. And for a K award, you're going to want to describe how your project, if funded, is going to result in your independence and follow-on studies. Then you would move into writing the research strategy. And Dr. Hall talked about sort of the page expectations where you're limited to 12 pages for this research strategy combined with your candidate information. And you'll have to make some decisions on how you want to split that information up in your K award proposal. We know that reviewers often read your specific aims and your project abstract first, then your research strategy. So that's why we want to communicate some of the candidate information and career development in your specific aims page. And we want to make the key training and mentor context self-contained where needed in all of the sections. Also, keep feasibility in mind. So K research support budgets are limited, so we need to be explicit if your mentor funding is supporting parts of your approach, and end with a brief future directions paragraph that communicates the long-term potential for the work and for your research. So for K applications, we want to make the integration apparent. We want to show how the research project supports your career development objectives and builds independence, and explain how it helps you gain the skills you need, how it relates to your mentor's work, and critically, how your project is distinct from but complementary to your mentor's ongoing research. For scoring, K applications are scored across 5 criteria: the candidate, the career development and mentoring plan, the research plan, your mentors, consultants, and collaborators, and the environment and institutional commitment. And these are listed in logical order, not necessarily priority, but specifics can vary by program and institute or center, so always confirm with the notice of funding opportunity regarding the specific review criteria. This slide summarizes our best practices. You want to start with research and career goals, reverse engineer for the mechanism, use a gap-based approach. You have these great resources with My IDP and with the clinical appraisal document. And then seek feedback from mentors, peers, consultants, NIH program officers. Build a strong mentoring team. Use specific measurable language aligned with institute and center priorities, and demonstrate your institutional support, and have a plan for resubmission as a normal part of the process. It's very rare to be funded on the first try. So I have several resources available to you linked in this slide deck, including funded applications and NIH FAQs and webinars. But I'm going to go ahead and switch things over to Dr. Lee, who I think has a couple of slides to share and is going to walk us through her successful proposal and what that effort was like and how it's going now.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for having me here today. I'm actually very honored to have this opportunity to share my own experience with the K Award. Specifically, I am an NCI K01 awardee, and I got the award about 2 years ago, and it really was a mechanism that helped change the trajectory of my career. I am going to try my best to not repeat a lot of what Sarah and Dr. Hall had already covered regarding the mechanisms and the review criteria. And I just really want to share casually what it actually felt like navigating the process, the strategic and emotional realities of it all. So when people, think of the K Award, they often think it's just another grant mechanism, but as you guys have heard, it's not. It's a structured investment in yourself, your trajectory, your independence, your long-term research identity. So for me, the K Award really gave me the much needed protected time for my methodological growth, and it provided a runway towards independence for myself. So for some context, before I received my K and as an incoming new junior faculty member, I was required to teach 4 to 5 courses per year. So in the School of Nursing, we're hard money, so we fall back on 4 to 5 courses a year. And so as a new faculty hire in my school, when I first came on, I was only promised 1 semester of protected time. So as you can imagine, that doesn't really help. That's nice, but it really doesn't help you continue that research trajectory and to really hit and you're required to hit the ground running to secure pilot grants, et cetera, to even keep doing the research that you want to do. And then on top of that, our School of Nursing was highly pushed us to be heavily engaged in service at the very start. So, with the mix of teaching and service, research for me at the start of my junior faculty position, it felt really fragmented. It was stuff that was just squeezed into the margins when I had time. But when I received my K Award, the minimum 75% protected time fundamentally shifted everything. It really did. It excused me from all my required teaching and most of my service responsibilities. Those became elective. I do want to note that because I was on the tenure track, even though they were optional, it really wasn't for me because I was still working towards promotion and tenure. And so even though I could spend my entire time just focused on research, I still had to document, my strength in teaching as well as service throughout the last few years at the start of my award. So even though I was fully protected, I still had to kind of figure out how to balance service and teaching on top of my research. With the award, for the first time, I really felt that I could just focus on building my own study, my research, my methods, and then to also continue publishing and then to build a stronger team to support R01 submission. So my protected time, people talk about protected time. It's not symbolic. It really is transformational, and it has changed my trajectory towards tenure and promotion. One of the biggest mistakes that I would say junior investigators tend to make is treating the K like a small R01. It's really not. As you guys have already heard, the K Award really scores you on the candidate statement, the career development plan, and then the research plan. But they also look very carefully on your mentorship team and then that institutional environment support letter. So your research matter, but it's just a very small portion. Well, not small, but it is a good, only a portion of that overall score. And your reviewers for a K Award is ultimately asking, will this type of investment produce an independent investigator down the road? So as Sarah and Dr. Hall has already, emphasized, your application really should tell a cohesive career story. It needs to read like a career narrative, not just like a project description and a list of activities you're going to do. It all has to tie together, each of those components. I also want to talk about a couple of my early mistakes and that I stumbled upon. I would say I learned a lot of this when I was applying for the diversity supplement. So I actually applied to the K Award a lot later in my career. for the NCI K01, when I applied, you had to, and I think that might still be the case, when you apply, you have to have a guaranteed faculty position. So when I was a postdoc, I did my postdoc at Hopkins, we actually were discouraged to apply to any K awards because Hopkins was very upfront and said that we cannot have you guys submit a K award while you're here as a postdoc because we can't guarantee you a faculty position. And so because I don't know if GW is different, but that is something you want to look at when you are applying for the K to kind of see, well, is there a promise of a potential faculty position? Because by the time you get the award, you have to show that there is going to be a faculty position that you are going to transition into. And so when I was writing the K or the diversity supplements, one of the things that I felt I focused too much on in the early stages was proving that I was already independent. I thought I needed to, demonstrate I didn't need too much training, just a little bit of it, but that really was the opposite of what a K was asking for. The K award funds growth and not proof of, independence already. So it was really hard for me to kind of figure out that balance of what is my mentor's work versus my own work, and how can I merge the two to really talk about, to justify why I needed a career developmental award. So that was one thing that I really had to kind of learn how to balance at the start of drafting a K. I think a lot of us encounter this when we first write a career development grant. The training plan tends to be vague. Dr. Hall gave great examples, and I remember being on the opposite side, being an audience member, sitting in on multiple K presentations and picking up tips here and there. But the training plan needs to be very specific, and it needs to tie clearly to your training objectives. There has to be measurable outcomes, a structured timeline. So after my first round of feedback, I actually had to redo my career development plan. And then I did use the gap-based framework. So what skills do I have? What skills do I lack? How will this award fill those gaps? And then how does that lead to independence? So that reframing for my K award really strengthened, I felt, my entire application. And then a third thing would be like scope. I think for those applying to the NCI K01 award, we tend to have a smaller research budget annually. Most of it is spent just supporting your salary. And so your scope is critical. You have to make sure it's feasible within that, what they give you. So like if it's as low as 20 to 25K a year, you have to figure out how are you going to fund research staff? How are you going to use students? Or how are you paying out participants if you have, participant incentives? Are you paying out your community partners, So those are a lot of the things, like if that minimal budget does not cover everything, how are you going to find the additional resources to help you through that process? And that's where Dr. Hall was saying, you're expected to, possibly lean on your mentoring team to kind of support some of that, or your department or school. So, in that, be strong, but not overly ambitious with the scope, and then set yourself up towards an R01. You're just doing a component of it. You're doing something to kind of build towards the R01. It is not your R01. It is your launch pad. So, ask yourself, does the project logically evolve? Will it logically evolve into a competitive R01 within that 3 to 5 year time that you would be funded? If not, that's where you rethink the scope, right? So, I think honestly, the common pitfall is proposing a project that is too large, too clinical, or too dependent on the resources that you have no control over. Another reality is resubmission. It's something often uncomfortable for a lot of us to talk about, but many successful K awardees that I know, most of us were funded on resubmission. So resubmission is absolutely normal. My first submission scored well, but not well enough for funding. It was, difficult because you spend, multiple months working on this, and then you don't get funded, and then that you have to spend more months on it. But the whole point was that I didn't give up. I spent a lot of my time in the next term refining my application, strengthening, securing and strengthening my pilot findings. I continued to publish manuscripts, and then eventually I resubmitted, and it was successful. So when I received the critiques from the reviewers, I made sure I read them carefully. I responded respectfully and thoroughly to them. I made sure to strengthen weak areas instead of defending them. And just think of, when you get your summary statement as free consulting from senior scientists in other areas, right? So the whole point of a resubmission is, remember that resilience is part of this process, and that it is not, it is just refinement. It's not a failure on you. So for me, a couple of things that I did from my initial submission to my resubmission that I think really helped strengthen and push it towards funding was I continued to publish a lot. I secured small starter funding. I think that at least for the NCI K01, a lot of people, I know, people say pilot data is not required, but it is a very powerful thing to have on your application, especially for a resubmission, because they want to see from this initial submission to your resubmission, what have you done to, with even without the resources of the K funding. And so I want to plug stuff like the OVPR cross-disciplinary research funds, the CDRF, the University Facilitating Funds. Those are all possibilities for small pilot funding. I also want to plug Dr. Hall leads and Dr. Cito leads the ACS institutional research grants, and that's also for early career. Those are all great awards to potentially use to help you towards gaining pilot data. So I spent a lot of time in my early years working on my pilot data, and honestly, it just shows that there's feasibility to what you're trying to propose. And then I guess for mentorship, a lot of has been touched on this already, but it's more important than you think. Of course, they look specifically at. I do think that it matters that your mentor, especially your primary, has NIH funding history or some big funding history. Major bonus points if they have a mentoring track record, because they want to make sure that at least one of those member on your mentor group has that mentoring track to help push you to the next level. And then that there's also alignment between the project you're proposing and their expertise. So what strengthened my application with regards to the mentoring team there is that, they had NIH funding. Almost all of them had NIH funding, but I also had a balance between senior faculty and kind of mid-career faculty, because sometimes when they see all senior faculty, they might question whether those senior faculty have the time to devote to your project. And so sometimes having a mix between mid-career and senior faculty really balances out the team. And then also being very concrete about your meeting structure, like monthly one-on-ones, quarterly full team meetings, mapping that all out. Just don't, like Dr. Hall said, don't just list the mentors. Tell them why each person on your team is necessary and important. What gaps do they fill? How often will you meet them? How will your progress be evaluated? Be very specific. I can't emphasize that enough. And for me, what I struggled with at GW was finding a match for my specific topic. So what I ended up having to do was assembling my research team around the methodological expertise that I wanted to gain over my career, 5-year career trajectory. So I didn't have someone specifically focusing on HPV self-sampling but I had to pull together a team that kind of focused on implementation science, clinical trial research, human usability testing. So a lot of mine was kind of pulling together people who had the methodological expertise. And then I brought some of the content expertise, and then how can their current projects help me push mine forward? So that would be what I would say about the mentoring team. And honestly, the bottom line for mentors for me was that find mentors who actually have time for you, that they're invested in your success, and who would strongly advocate for you. Build a team that really will make time for you. A lot of people want to be a part of career development grants and all of that, but not everyone has that time to devote, because they don't get effort on this. So it is volunteer, and they truly need to be invested in your trajectory moving forward. The topic of program officer, I know there was a comment in the Q&A about POs and kind of like the do you contact them or not? I was hesitant. Honestly, I was quite hesitant in the beginning too. I felt it was very unnatural for me to reach out to a PO. I was, junior faculty, a little worried about that, but I ended up, making sure that I was prepared for my meeting with them. I came prepared. I made sure I had an organized aim page. I had clear questions I wanted to ask them. And the main reason for my first meeting with them to make sure that there was an alignment with their institution's priorities for that year that I was applying. And so while I hesitated, and it took me a while before I initiated my first meeting with my PO, I will say that it truly paid off. I ended up developing a relationship with, I've gone through a couple of POs on the K. I think I've transitioned through 4 different ones for this particular mechanism. And it was tough, but with each of them, they were able to kind of pass along some of the information to the next PO. And so I was on their radar for, the entire time that I was applying to when I got my award. And even in the last year when I actually lost my, I was told that I was not going to have my funding renewed. So I panicked and all of that. But because of my relationship with that PO or interim PO at that time, he reached out and told me, okay, this is the time you need to submit your progress report. Like, so there was insight tips where, because I was kind of regularly checking in, but not, aggressively, I was able to get kind of tips ahead of time, I feel. So I would say I would encourage reaching out and building that relationship with a PO in advance. And then in terms of IRB readiness, so if your K is going to get funded, your PO will likely ask for IRB approval status almost ASAP. They tend to ask for that during your just-in-time phase, where they're kind of looking at funding you, but you haven't gotten the award letter. And so I would highly suggest submitting IRBs before funding, just to demonstrate that you're ready, and it helps accelerate the timeline for that notice of award. It also shows from your first submission to your resubmission what steps you've done to move your research trajectory forward without the K funding, and then do it as early as possible. So I think that's important. And then a few final takeaways I would say. I had during my initial submission, I felt very disconnected, did not have a lot of support in that process in terms of my peers. During my resubmission, I actually started reaching out to a couple of my peers at other universities who were going through similar processes. And, I think it was just a support group, a great support group where, we kind of went through the process together. We kept each other accountable for our timelines. We didn't necessarily share our full grants because sometimes that becomes unhelpful comparisons. But what we were able to do is discuss our structure, how we were approaching the timeline organization, what are some strategic approach they learned from their PO or mentors that could be passed along. So I would say, if you're able to reach out to a couple of people, or you are lucky enough to be in a postdoc program where others are going through it, use that as a support system. And the NIH reporter and the matchmaker, use them as tools. Don't imitate them, but use them to review project narratives and abstracts, focus on structure, clarity, and framing there, and just kind of see what has actually been funded and where are the gaps that you're trying to fill. And I think that's basically some of the main things. I would institutional support. I would say that's super, super important. I didn't take, at first I would say that my letter was pretty generic, oh yes, my school is going to protect me for the 75% time. But I think having that clearly written out, that's very important. You can emphasize the space that the school might be committing to you. I know a lot of, when I was applying to my K, we were kind of in that COVID time. And so a lot of people just went remote and there wasn't a lot of space left for a school of nursing. But the promise of physical space, if you plan on having RAs in, what are other resources? If you don't have enough to conduct your research, research activities, what can they provide? Can they assign a PhD student to your project for the first year or two, if they're going to come in with a paid tuition anyway. So there's different ways to kind of negotiate with your school to show that they are committed to you even before you get funded. I think that we don't take the institutional letter. Sometimes some of us just don't take it to heart enough, I guess, right? I think we just write it to write it, and then we don't follow up. And I do think that having that letter in hand, and then after it was funded, going to my dean and chair and say hey, this is what you promised me, then they have to abide by it. So I think that's important. And I think to end, your project, your K project really should be used as kind of an R01 runway. the K award is really not an end all situation though. Just because you get it, you have to use the award wisely, use that time wisely. Those 5 years, I mean, will really it's very short. Like and like because by year 3, I'm looking at having to apply for my first RO1 and all of that. And so finding time to conduct your research, do all the training, and to submit an RO1 or 2, it's a lot all at once. And so just making sure that you're mentally prepared for that, physically carve out space to do that and time to do that is very important. So I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. So let me take this time to thank our panelists. Thanks, Sarah, for laying a very, very good foundation, and thanks to Dr. Hall for providing lots of useful tips, and thanks especially to Dr. Lee for sharing those experiences. And I want to thank you all for the lots of questions that I see in our Q&A. And thanks to Dr. Ho, who has actually been responding to some of those questions. So now we want to take time to look into some of those questions. So I'm going to pose some of those questions to our panelists. And one of the questions that has been posed is, how do I determine if I am ready for a K award? Go ahead, Dr. Hall.
Okay, I thought you were going to ask a slightly different question, which is fine. So I think the question was posed, how do I know if I'm ready for a K award or an F award or maybe an R21? So I can understand how you would get into that situation. Typically, the F fellowship period is really one where you're earning your terminal degree. So if you're a postdoc, you might have an F32 application, which is totally fine, and that could be paying for your early phase postdoc training. Fantastic. When you finish your F32, you might say, I'm becoming more independent. I now want the K99 R00 Transition Award. That trajectory would be pretty wonderful for a basic scientist to move from the fellowship support to the K99 senior postdoc to the R00, which is a transition award if you get a faculty appointment here or another place. So it really requires that you get that job to get the rest of the R00. So that would be a fantastic trajectory. The Ks are different from each other, right? So determining which one you want is a bit different. I think the biggest thing I hear from clinically trained folks is, do I want to get a K08, K23, or do I want to write an R01? And this is an incredibly important issue. Daisy touched upon some of this as well. It really asks whether you're ready for independence. If you're playing in the R01, R21 field, that's where everybody else is. They're fully fledged investigators. That's a pretty tough place to be if you're not ready. It's a pretty tough place to be anyway. If you're eligible for a K and you think you would benefit from additional time for pilot data, additional time to learn skills for your independent career, I would take it in a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. So these are really designed to make sure you're ready to go out there into the big world. This is kind of your last chance to get that mentorship. So I hope that answers the question, but maybe there's more.
Thank you. Let me move on because there are lots of questions, big questions. So I want to move on to the next question. I'm going to direct this to Sarah. Is it allowable to apply simultaneously for a K award and an R01 or R21 based on the same research project?
So you cannot apply for a K award and an R award at the same time with the same research project or a highly overlapping research project.
Thank you. Dr. Hall, would you like to add anything?
One of the things I like to see is for somebody to project that they will write an R01 or R21 maybe in the 3rd or 4th year of their K. I'm seeing some things in the chat saying, oh, that seems really early. It does seem early. You can also become a co-investigator on somebody else's R01, including your mentor's R01, during your K. So that can also help to develop your research activities in this somewhat protected environment. So there are lots of ways to cobble this together. I would do anything available to me to not be playing by myself in the R01 pool.
Thank you
I
for
agree.
sharing.
I just wanted to say too, if you're applying as a co-investigator, to think about early stage investigator status when you do move into the R01
Yep.
space. So it matters
Yep.
what you're listed as in the collaboration, as far as if you can maintain that early stage investigator status for your own independent R01 application.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for sharing those strategies. Let me move on. So when we're talking about the K Awards, we are also talking here about the issue of mentoring. So the important question here, and I'll pose this to Dr. Lee and then move on to the others. So the important question here is, how do I effectively argue that my proposed research is independent from my mentors while still relying on their guidance? Dr. Lee, and then we can hear from others.
Thank you. So I would go back to what I had just mentioned. And for me, for example, my primary mentor at the time, I had a co-mentor situation, co-primary mentor situation, because I really needed to show that I could put together a core team to help support me. And one had, actually both had a lot of NIH funding, but one had more current funding, but it was in the realm of tobacco work, but it was clinical trials. It had a bunch of other things that I can use to kind of finesse my career development plan. So I think it's a piece. I know it sounds terrible, but it's like almost piecemealing it and convincing them why it works for you. In my situation, like I said, I applied to the K a lot later in my career trajectory. As I had a postdoc that was about 2.5 to 3 years, and then for the NCI one, you only, I think, have 6 years or 7 years to actually apply. Whereas there are other institutes where you have 10 years from when you got your doctorate to be able to apply. So, I already lost a good chunk of time. And then when I started my faculty position, I was on what we call a diversity supplement. So that helps give me protected time. Thank goodness that I jumped on that before my K, but my K came in later. And then, but through that, I've been working, I was pulled into a bunch of other research projects with faculty members. So I'm a part of the GW Cancer Center, also the DCCFAR, working on HIV work. And so, you meet different colleagues there. If you click well with them, you can see what projects they are in, they have to offer. And sometimes they write you in. And I was lucky enough to kind of meet a couple of those people earlier in my career. And honestly, I think getting a pilot award and then kind of pulling together your collaborators there, that helps too, because then you're coming to the table offering something to others, with a pilot award versus the other way around, going to a mentor and constantly asking them to give. I think having something like a pilot, involving them on papers, all of that makes a huge difference.
Great. Okay, let me move on to the next interesting question. Reviewers often complain that K applications are over-ambitious. What is the secret to balancing a rigorous research plan with the necessity for training? Any takers?
I think I tried a part of that, and I'm sure Sarah will come at it as well. It is very often that there are overambitious Ks and that they'll have to be revised. You should be thinking that you're going to have 3 aims and not super complex ones. So don't have A, B, C, D, E, etc. It is just you who is going to get this work done, not a legion of other people. You should be thinking pretty carefully about what you need to learn during the execution of those aims. So where I see people be overambitious is they kind of skip the whole part they had to learn how to do a clinical trial, or they skip the whole section that they don't know how to get in the Medicare database. So remember that is going to take some time where you learn how to do that. So don't underestimate the training component of this. The second part is remember your mentors. We always blame overambitious applications on the mentor. We always do. So go and say, do you think this is feasible to get done in 3 years, 4 years? And listen carefully to what you hear. So you're not going to probably finish, your MPH 5 papers and 3 aims in that period of time. That's an awful lot to achieve. So use other input to make sure that you're taking into account that you're in a learning environment. And it takes time to learn that thing. I don't know, Sarah, do
Thank
you have
you.
any other views?
Yes, I think just as you said, it's the research is meant to serve the training, not the other way around. And so reviewers expect that your project is rigorous and meaningful, but it's also limited in scope to allow you that time for training, and it's serving as a part of a training. And also, when you're thinking about that, um, and how your aims are going to play out, you can also think about, mentors might be more essential early on and then gradually stepping back, because another criticism is the eventual independence of the investigator. So thinking through how you might show you working toward independence during the timeline of the grant, and using your timeline to show that it is appropriately scoped. So if you're concerned about feasibility and what they're going to say about your project as far as ambition goes, you use the timeline in your research strategy for your research project and the timeline in your career development plan to show how every step is going to be completed and when. And that way it is easier for the reviewers to see what your expectations are as far as timing and to see if that's reasonable.
And I
Thank
would
you.
add, like I said, the budget helps too. Using that budget and keeping that in mind, because you really,
Don't
oh,
get
when
any
you break
money.
it down, it really doesn't give you much to work with, because it also goes towards your career development courses or whatever you're signing up for too. So if you're going to a conference every year and it happens to be an expensive conference, like that comes out of that budget, so you, like, once you start pinpointing some of the necessities, you'll realize that we don't have much, and then it will help you reduce your scope. I also just wanted to like also note the interdependence of aims. I have got, oh my God, I've had so many conflicting thoughts on that. And for me, I ultimately was struggling so hard to write my aims because I had to make sure that the two were related but not overlapping. So if one failed, how can I still continue to do the other one? And that was a really hard exercise for me to get through, because I'm used to like stage approach, right? Like you do this part, you do, let's say, a qualitative part, then you do the quantitative part or whatever. But it really, teasing it apart really well would help. And then one of my last things would be like, white space is important on your document. It was a struggle also for me, and it took me some time to learn. But throw everything on a paper, on your draft. But once you get to the last month of like tightening and cleaning, that's where you start figuring out, like, is this too verbose? Like, are you like, can you simplify this more? I made sure, like, during my resubmission, that I was carefully bolding things, and that there was enough white space on the edges and even in between certain sections. So I know that's silly or like more formatting related, but I think it does make a difference because they have so many of these applications to review. Dr. Hall has reviewed them, and I've done other review panels, and it's just like you need to make it easy for them. Tie every part together. I know it might be repetitive, but I had to reiterate certain things a lot throughout multiple sections.
Thank you. So, Dr. Lee, you have shared so much with us about some of the mistakes that you made as part of your journey. But I want to hear from Dr. Hall, who has served so much on some of these review panels. What, in your view, is the number one mistake that you see in some of these proposals?
I would say an inadequate career development plan. So either people think they already know how to do everything and they've spent enough time trying to strengthen their credentials for the application that they haven't made it clear what they still need to learn or how they'll learn it. Um, or really not having activities that will address what their needs are to become independent. So the K committees are smack on this idea of what will it take Daisy to become independent? What would it take Allison to become independent? And they're different answers. So it's not like there's a generic plan, and they're going to look to see if it addresses the gaps that you identify or maybe that they can sometimes see in your preparation. So the career development plan is key.
Thank you so much. And thank you too for sharing those resources. I saw the tables that you shared that colleagues can use as they are preparing their applications. So thanks to everyone for all those questions. Now I want to provide opportunities for our panelists to provide their closing remarks. I'm going to ask each one of them to provide their parting shots. So a minute for each one of them. Let's hear from Sarah.
Yes. So Daisy, Dr. Lee brought this up, and I think it's a great point, is that any NIH application you're working on is going to be persuasive writing. So we're moving from that scholarly writing space, and we are trying to persuade the reviewer that our project is worth funding. And so instead of communicating the knowledge that you hold and how knowledgeable you are about your field, we're trying to communicate the story of the need for our funding. So using that gap analysis and beginning there, showing that you need a K award. And as Dr. Hall said, making sure that you have a robust career development plan and that you're clearly communicating and being explicit about what your needs are and where everything fits together.
Thank you so much. And let's hear from Dr. Hall.
In 1 minute, I don't know. For those of you at GW, reach out to your Associate Dean for Research. I'm that person in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I will help to orient you about Ks. I read all the Ks that come out of the school. And I'm happy to work with you and your mentor team to prepare a strategically appropriate application. We're trying to put a ton of things online so you can look at them in your leisure. We also have examples of successful Ks that we post in our grants library. So take advantage of those things and then go and ask for help.
Wonderful. We appreciate all that support. And now let's hear from Dr. Lee.
I would say read the RFA or PAR like carefully. Make sure that you're hitting those points. And like, for example, if the budget says 25K, don't go over that. Like, it's just those little mistakes, but it matters because they're like, well, you're not paying enough close attention. Be specific. Link the career development plan with your personal statement with that research plan. Like, I can't say that enough. Like, I have had feedback from my reviewers where it said like, well, this training point doesn't, this training plan does not fit this research aim or something. And I'm like, but it was written in there. So there's, you just have to reiterate and just know that people are skimming, unfortunately, sometimes. And so just reiterate, like pick out like I would say pick out like your 3 or 5 key points that you want to draw across all those pages. And here strategically highlight them in the 3 different sections that are getting scored. And then don't give up. I think resilience is really the key to just surviving in academia. In general, like I have definitely had a roller coaster of a ride because of the current administration and all of that, shutting down my program and then like having to restart it again. I really wasted a good 6 months doing all that. And so just don't give up. I was disheartened because I couldn't find a strong enough mentoring team, or at least I didn't feel like I did at the time. I felt discouraged because I didn't have enough time to write it. But get that, draft out, get it out to different reviewers. There are so many resources, especially Dr. Hall has many, Sarah, I'm sure has many as well. Use them and just don't give up. Like, I know it's going to seem daunting most of the time getting to that submission stage, but keep push through and get that in. And then use that resubmission time to really submit your best work.
Thank you for all those tips, and thanks too for those words of encouragement. And on that note, let me now invite Dr. Elkins from the Office of the Vice Provost for Research.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for attending today. I'm Esther Erkins, and I'm the Research Enhancement Officer in the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, and we are here to help. We're here to help you as you gear up to begin going after external funding through our research development consultations. We provide assistance with project ideation. If you need to kind of think through an approach or which direction you might want to go, we can assist with that. We assist with identifying funding opportunities. We can kind of orient you through using Pivot to help identify funding opportunity. In addition, we also work with Hanover Research to provide very comprehensive funding perspectives that align with your specific area of work. So this is a resource that we have to offer you as you think through your journey to go after external funding. Most pertinent to today, we also provide assistance with proposal editing. We use seasoned consultants to kind of do a comprehensive review of your proposal, to go through, do intensive edits to really help strengthen the competitiveness of your proposal. We use Hanover to provide some of those services, and then we also have some independent consultants that we use as well. And so it's really important if you come to us for services to try to come as early as possible. We recommend a minimum of 8 weeks in advance to ensure that we have space to accommodate the request. In an ideal world, if you could reach out as soon as you think you want to apply, that would be best. Because one of the things that has happened is more and more folks become aware that we provide the service. We get booked. So it's really important that you reach out to us very early if you want some assistance with or proposal editing and review. And so think about that as you begin to embark on your process to work on your care award. Reach out to us. You can reach out to us to contact us on the website, and the address is listed on the slide, or you can even reach out to me directly via email. So thank you for attending today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity now to thank our three panelists for a great job. Let me also take this opportunity to thank all the participants who were with us during these 2 hours. Thank you all for all those great questions. And thanks to Dr. Hall for responding to some of those questions. I saw you actually typing as we were proceeding. And importantly too, I would like to thank my colleagues who are behind the scenes, who have been busy preparing for this event. So thank you all and goodbye.